This week's theme on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast is, are the days of ultra low interest rates gone for good? And what does that mean for you? Well, today I'm talking about adjusting your debt and your spending decisions with the idea that interest rates are not going to start going down again anytime soon, and inflation may stick around for a little bit longer. Now, of course, I could be wrong about all of this, but if you've been listening this week, there are many compelling reasons to believe that stickier inflation that doesn't go back to the 2% target is going to force the Fed to keep interest rates higher for longer. That could extend out several years, especially if we don't have a recession. Now, if we have a recession, that changes everything. And of course, we could have a recession at any time. But the Fed would likely start lowering interest rates in a recessionary environment. But so far that hasn't happened, and it may not happen, and it's very difficult to predict when that will happen. If you're wrong, you want to be wrong in assuming rates are going to be higher for longer, especially when it comes to debt and spending decisions. So if you must borrow and take out a loan, you want to do it with the expectation that you're not going to be able to refinance at a better rate. This is especially true for buying a house. So many of you are probably in a similar situation like I am. My mortgage rate is just above 3%, and it's pretty nice. Now, my husband and I have actually talked about moving, not real seriously, but like we'll go look at houses we like occasionally. But the thing that keeps us planted and not seriously considering a move is that mortgage rates are like 8% right now. Why would I give up my 3% mortgage? My house is not falling apart. It's perfectly fine. It works. There's no pressing need to move. I'm not moving across the country. We're just thinking about it, kicking around the idea. Okay, so that's a lot of people buying a house right now. But there are other people too, where maybe you're forced to move. Maybe you're changing jobs, you're relocating, whatever the reason is. If you can prevent locking in a higher interest rate on your mortgage, unless of course you're paying cash, I would make sure that you can afford that higher interest rate. So a lot of people, I've talked to many people right now who have moved, and they do have a 6.5%, 7.5% mortgage. And they've done so under the assumption that it's a stretch for them right now. That's a lot of money going out the door. It's very expensive, but they've done so with the idea that they'll be able to refinance. Okay, this is not a good plan, because if rates stay higher for longer, the longer that continues with those payments, it's stressing you financially. You don't want to be in that situation. So if you're going to borrow, take out a loan, if you're going to move, you want to do it with the expectation that you will not be able to refinance at a better rate, maybe for 5 or 10 years even. Okay, so this thought process and planning for this is going to help protect you. It's going to help ensure that you can actually afford what you're purchasing, whether that's a house or car or anything else. Okay. Many people are entering into expensive debts that aren't affordable because, again, they believe rates are just going to go right back down. They can just refinance in a few months or a year. That is a really bad financial decision, and we want to avoid that. Overall, I would advise against taking on any new debts. No matter where you're financing from, it's very expensive right now. So avoiding putting anything on a credit card. It would be much better to build up emergency savings, emergency funds if possible. So if you could pay cash for something. So my husband and I, of course, as the weather starts to improve and it gets warmer, we had our first 80+ degree day here recently. And guess what? Day one, turn on the AC, making a little bit of a funky noise. My husband goes and checks it out. We've had problems with our AC unit for quite a long time. It's the original one, which is like 20 years old at this point. And we had the repair guy come out, take a look at it, and he basically said, this thing is shot. You need a brand new AC unit. So that's what we had to get. So we had this unplanned, unexpected, very expensive new AC unit that we had to buy. And the last thing that you want to do is put it on a credit card. You want to pay cash for it, which thankfully we were able to do. So this higher interest rate, higher inflation environment means you just want to be more careful about your spending. You want to have more breathing room so you can avoid putting emergency purchases on a very expensive credit card where interest rates on credit cards are approaching 20-25%. You have home equity line of credits that are very expensive. Pretty much everything is very expensive, and it's likely to stay that way in this higher interest rate environment. The other thing is that, if inflation is back down to a more manageable 3%, 3.5%, you have this situation where things are getting a bit more expensive. So I've heard also people talk about that, if you're going to move and you can afford to buy a house and you can afford that higher mortgage, maybe not necessarily wait. There's two sides of this issue. So you have a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines right now. You have a shortage of houses. I'm not an expert in the real estate market, but I do know how psychology works and how people think, especially when it comes to money. And you have a lot of people like my husband and I who are just sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to go down before seriously looking at moving. We're not the only people doing that right now. Lots and lots of people are doing that. Lots of people I talk to every single day are doing that. And so what you're likely to have is, because there's a shortage of houses, you're likely to see prices perhaps even go up more. So the key here is affordability. I'm not saying don't move. I'm not saying don't lock in a higher mortgage rate, but I'm saying you want to make sure that you can actually afford that decision and afford that move, that new car. It all comes down to affordability. So if you can afford it, there's not necessarily a reason to hold off on it, especially if you have the emergency funds set aside, et cetera, and you're going to be okay financially. Things will likely continue to get more expensive because, again, inflation is not back down to that low target. And you have other things where you have a shortage of houses, that's not going away. It takes a long time to build up the inventory. And depending on where you're looking, what house you're looking at, you're probably not going to see a crash in housing. Just doesn't seem like it's in the cards. Okay. That's my non-expert opinion, I guess, on real estate. And what I would do, I just can't stomach a 8% mortgage. Not going to happen. I guess I'll pay a higher price for a house or just stay put for much, much longer. Who knows? All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.